Hi, everybody. My name is David Clare. I am the host of the ChUG podcast. This is season 2 of the ChUG podcast that we're starting. Those of you who were at the very beginning with us might have remembered that the very, very first podcast we did was called Chatting Around the Dumpster Fire because we were in the COVID years, those happy days. And now we're back into a whole new era of craziness and all kinds of weird things happening. And so we have a whole new dumpster to warm us up, dumpster fire to warm us up. And so happy to kick out this second season with Camille Stegen, Kathy Kluepfel, Kathy Daniels, but changed her name. Congratulations. And then this is continuing my tradition of mispronouncing everybody's name. Kluepfel?
Kluepfel is correct. Yes. I
Awesome.
stuck that in there, that name change, without saying anything to anyone.
Daniel Vocelle also here. We so we're gonna do somewhat of a more less sciencey and more not purely political, but like heavily influenced by what's going on right now in the US. We talked about this before, and we did not want to do the whole revisit the hot topic questions of should have Biden left earlier and why blah 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 blah. I think we're going to keep to the science field. But let's start with just how are you guys doing these days? What's the how do you feel about what's going on, and how do you feel? How do you see how's the craziness impacting you in your day-to-day activities? Start with Camille, maybe.
I mean, for me, it's not so much on a scientific level because I'm Canadian. So at least we're not immune from the craziness because we are impacted by the tariffs that will happen, that might not happen, that will happen tomorrow, that are canceled. And it does impact also our purchasing and decision and even instrumentation decisions these days. But outside from that and the threats of being annexed one day or another, or having the Great Lakes not being part of Canada, things are swell.
Yeah. I think there's a bunch of Canadian colleagues that are mentioning not going to meetings like CyTO, ABRF, just because, hey, not the cost, not it's just purely we're not going to go. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to CyTO this year because I'm part of a workshop. So I kind of said that I would be going. But if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't go. Definitely not planning to present anything next year. I don't think that West Palm Beach is a good idea as a scientific meeting place right now, but it's not my decision. The only thing I can decide is whether I plan to go or not. And from now on, no Glifka, no Cyto, nothing in the States, because I can't use my tax. Everything is funded by taxpayers, and it would be unethical to use taxpayers' money to fund, in some ways, a country that is trying to harm us and that is trying to get our currency to go to hell. So yeah, I'll see you in Europe.
You should do your own stuff in Montreal. That's what I was thinking before.
We do it.
Yeah.
Like with just the local gang. Yeah, we have meetings once in a while. Absolutely not scientific. We pick a
Yeah, but that's what I
restaurant.
mean. Like, do your own science meeting in Montreal, and
Eventually
yeah,
we'll do that. But once in a while, we just want to get together and chat
yeah.
and have fun.
Kathy, how are things up in your part of the universe?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Like interesting is a maybe not the best word to use, but you know, I'm in Massachusetts, so very scientifically focused, I'll say. So a big part of the community that I have around me, not just professionally in my little circle for where I work, but just a lot of people like my neighbors and stuff like that um, are in the field. And just in general, Massachusetts is a little bit more or a lot more of a left-leaning state. So there's a lot kind of I'm in a bit of a bubble in terms of where I'm at physically, but I I can speak to how I feel personally about everything, and it's a disaster, right? So as a scientist and as an American, I'm not happy with the way things are going, and my personal view is that for many, many years now, we've actually had a pushback on science, and we have um, pretty poor scientific literacy in our communities. And what's happening now is we have that being pushed further, right? Whether it's about vaccines and a lot of the misinformation that's being spread there, or about drug treatments and medicine in general, or transgenic mice, right?
Mhm.
Things like that. So what what I see is a lot of misinformation, and what I'm trying to do is continue to educate a lot of people that I know that aren't in the field or aren't in that area, whether it's family or maybe acquaintances, things like that. Um, because I think that's the biggest thing right now. I'm seeing a lot of questions from friends. How good are the measles vaccines good for, right? Like, what do I need to do to protect my family right now? Things like that. And then people that I know that might not be fully aware of the implications of the decisions they've made, trying to educate them. Hey, this is what's happening with NIH indirect cost caps. Hey, this is what's happening with the potential of the incoming health secretary, things like that. Can you please make a call? This is directly impacting my field and my colleagues, maybe not me personally right now, but a lot of people that I care about, and just in general, my community that I'm very close with. So, hey, please advocate for me. I'm someone you care about, so please advocate for the people I care about, so that as a community we could better ourselves, right? So that's what I'm trying to focus on right now, having open conversations with people, telling them how they can go ahead and make an impact and try and make their voice heard. Because for me, I'm in a scientific bubble very much so, and talking to fellow scientists is great, but we need to talk to other people who are not in the community to educate them and tell them how they can help and address any concerns that they might have. And that's how I've been feeling about everything.
Yeah, it's we'll definitely get back to that because this is critical to, I don't know, what I want to do going forward. Like science used to be kind of a nice thing to talk about. Like everybody could at least agree on, hey, let's fight cancer. Cancer is bad. We'll defeat it, and that's and now it's like even that seems to be
I mean,
hard to
let's
find.
hear cancer's point of view.
Yeah.
And also just like the blind faith in people, not non-scientists, not non-clinicians, about, hey, you take this one pill, everything's going to be fine. You get X amount of minutes in sunshine, or you take a cold water bath, or you go in a float pool and everything's great. I love all of those things. I've done float tanks, I've done sensory deprivation, I've
Yeah.
done all that stuff. It's really awesome. It's not going to cure your colorectal cancer, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of that going around too. Just people who don't really understand how to critically think and
Yeah.
question what they hear.
Dan, what's up in your world?
What's up in my world? I think it's great that I get to see this from a lot of different perspectives through the lenses of like everything that's going on through, Reddit and Discord, through things at the institutional level and worldwide. I'd like to start from like that big approach. I used to work with the College of Engineering for like recruiting graduate students. And even that, like let's go back quite a few years. Graduate recruitment numbers have been down from international students. And so they do like a contingency where they go to DC every year to let different nations know like these are the programs we have, the resources, if you have top students, to bring them into graduate programs here within Michigan and Michigan State University. And I'll never forget that quite a few of the embassies, right, responded and they go, why would our students want to go to the US for grad school anymore? And we think of ourselves as the pinnacle of academia, and this is what people aspire to. And even, back then, 10 plus years ago, was a humbling experience to go, it's the PhD takes 4 years over here, it's funded. They want to get jobs back over here, all the chaos and the hurdles that you have to go through. So we were already starting with, is it worth it to go to the US to do research, to do academia? And granted, there was, probably a GDP bias over, the nations that thought that versus other nations. But I thought that was interesting. And when we consider where a lot of the rivals that we have are, right? Like China was building a university a day for a number of years. MSU has always had a large international population, like on the undergrad students, and those numbers, right, were decreasing too. So I think that was interesting where we were at in a global scale, right, in terms of science and trying to keep up. And now it seems like there are more hurdles in place. And that's an interesting perspective. When you think about technology and things that you're not up to date on, I think a lot of people still have this perspective that the United States is number one in science, but that's a perspective, that we have, internally. And it's interesting to think that that perspective is changing on a global scale. So I think when you start there and now we consider that there are even more hurdles in place, that's going to be interesting. And so people say, well, we can catch up. We got that spirit, but technology is just it's exponential, right? And it's growth. It feels like we're getting left behind. And I think that there are going to be repercussions from that, right? Where we're going to start experiencing, the brain drain. So then I think when we come back, locally for things that we're seeing in the US, I think we all feel a little helpless. And I think it was great what Kathy said, where she's reaching out, to her friends and family to say, help advocate for science. Um, we've been trying to provide at least like just a safe place where people can, video chat and come in on Fridays and just what's going on. So many of us are just single core, folks that are running our one or two instruments. And we all know how easy it is for, researchers at our institutions to forget about us, and now the institution as a whole. And it's, we want questions and answers to be able to come together and be like, what do you know? What have you guys heard? What's going on there? Um, from what I've gathered from that perspective, and especially with core facilities, I think your two opposite ends are those that have 100%, recharge. So salaries, instrument purchases, everything is covered by their instrument rates. The opposite end of that is where incidentals, right, are paying for like an office of research innovation. Um, that then pays for like core staff salaries, the ability to buy new instruments. Um, and there you have centralized cores, right? So it's like one office that oversees all the cores. Then it can get broken down from there that these are individual cores, maybe within departments, and the way that money is distributed is a little bit differently. And so for those centralized cores, it's now, oh, this lump sum of money we have has to last us as long as possible. So everybody gets a hold, right? Whether that's easy things like travel, conferences, to can't hire new people, we can't buy new instruments, big general freeze. A little bit easier for the folks that aren't in centralized cores, I think, right now, because usually their salary and funding, right, is guaranteed in like year blocks instead of maybe like quarterly blocks. So that seems to be the general spectrum right now. Some of the more recent issues that I've been hearing of is the uncertainty, right? And I think we've been losing a lot of our best technicians who go, I don't need the stress. I need this uncertainty in my life. I can move on to something else that, has a guaranteed salary for more than a year. And then you can't hire new technicians because of a hiring freeze right now. And I think that that's across all levels that has made things really, really difficult. Um, when I talk to just other staff, other PIs about this uncertainty, um, it's all their work has been shut down, right? For people that had long-term animal studies and these things, like being told, all right, you got to call your mice, you got to shut things down, prepare for the worst. They go, if this can happen once, it can happen again, right? Like this is not a one-off. If it's possible at any point. I can't stay here, right? So they're also looking internationally to say, I just need to go move somewhere where I can continue my studies, over the next 20 years. So the long-term impacts, I think, are going to be severe. On even a more local note within, Michigan, um, there there are rumors, I guess I would say, of people already getting death threats over doing, transgenic mice studies, and the groups that don't understand the difference between transgenic, meaning that we are changing those genes, trying to figure out, oh, how does this cancer start? Well, let's tweak this gene. Oh, now they got breast cancer, right? Like that's the gene that we should target if we're going to try to cure breast cancer. That's what transgenic means. Trans being different, right? Latin word for different. And those already we're getting people that are confused about that. Um, and I think that that's interesting if that's already going on, and what that means for the future. So that's my hot take.
It's fantastic that
Yeah.
like science itself like drives people to these kind of insane positions. Like it,
Yeah, and the lack of understanding of it,
like,
right? So
right,
just
right.
and the fact that there's such a push to say that, oh, I said the wrong, instead of saying I said the wrong thing, here's the correct information, doubling down on that incorrect information
Yeah,
that can have an impact on other people's lives and their safety, to be quite frank, based
yeah.
on what Daniel just said, right? And just to kind of add on, even historically, like before, like the current goings on, um, I could speak to my time when I was at an academic institute and I was a one-person core, just running the whole core by myself, double operating the sorter and training and doing maintenance, everything, like everyone's used to, right? Um, I had headcount and I was trying to bring people in. It was already difficult enough trying to compete with all of the biotechs and all of the pharmas to bring in junior level staff to come in. And you compound that with the fact that there's now that doubt, that seed of doubt, which is planted rightfully so in people's minds to say, should I go into academia right now? Is my job secure? Is it going to be there? So you're not only having to compete now if you're in an academic institution with, and quite frankly, even a hospital setting, if it's going to be impacted by research grant cuts, you have to then compete with biotech and pharma in a way that you never had before, right? Because there's this added doubt. So it's going to have even more implications based on that because it was historically very difficult.
Yeah. So, like I said, I don't really want to go into the details of the politics. I'm going to give a shout out to where I go to get my take on politics, which is the Bulwark on YouTube. It's basically a series of podcasts about the what's going on in nowadays, with Tim Miller and a bunch of great people talking about. So if you want, basically, it will give an idea of where I stand about all these things. I think everything that's happening is incredibly troubling. What I wanted to do today, though, is not to dwell into stuff that's too far away from our field of expertise and just stay with the science and very much go back to what Kathy was talking about. Basically, currently the attacks on science are, in my opinion, from two sides. One is our fearless leader is now Kennedy, who knows next to nothing about science, and essentially we're in a situation where he it seems that the current administration is building on this feeling that I think was already there in the population, where science is something to be distrusted, and not something that provides true benefits. There's a lot of fake things going on in the field of science. Nobody knows really what we're talking about. There's very highly popular YouTube people just making their money out of creating content, just shitting all over science and physics and whatnot. And of course, the other side is just Elon Musk finding like fraud and waste everywhere. And you scratch a little and you quickly realize, like, yeah, nothing he finds is actually something actionable. And I kind of wanted to take these two apart and kind of dig a little bit. Can we start about like the culture? Like, is it a US thing or is it Canadian as well? Like this thing about the science that being not particularly trustworthy, or am I making that up as well? I'm just like in my bubble, and I'm...
No, it's everywhere to a certain extent. And I'm wondering if we as life scientists or health scientists are finally realizing what environmental and climate scientists have been experiencing for 20 years now? Between false information that is going to the public about, well, in their case, it would be climate change and the human impact on that, to governments absolutely wanting to deny everything and continue as if nothing happened and everything is going well. This and death threats. Climate scientists have been receiving death threats for many years now. And if you're a woman, usually it also adds with rape threats very often. Like how many insults Greta Thunberg got just for saying like, hey, you know what, this is dangerous for my generation and the next one. We should care about this and do change our way of life just a tiny little bit to keep everyone alive. And I think that we're kind of meeting that point in life sciences regarding vaccines. Probably because most of the people that are younger than us didn't have grandparents who lost like siblings at a young age from infectious diseases, haven't met anyone with that was disabled because of polio. None of us and most of our parents have had measles as a kid and remember the photophobia that comes with it, or like the huge migraines that comes along, and losing those terrible memory or experiences, which should be a great achievement, suddenly becomes dangerous because people have forgotten how terrible things were when we didn't have modern medicine and vaccines. It's kind of silly, but we're seeing that everywhere. If we talk to people in the UK or in Europe, I think France has one of the lowest vaccination rate for measles and has had for quite a bit of time because of all the scares about the vaccine causing autism and things like that, even though it's been debunked many times. Yeah, we're just in an age where people want to distrust what they don't understand or what they weren't taught about, and we need to find a way to fight that.
Yeah. And I want to add in too, I completely agree with everything you're saying, Camille, but one thing that's also true about all this is, right, there's a pretty sordid past, at least in the United States, to what I'm aware of. If you look at the syphilis study with Stege, right, from 1932 to 1972, you had people that were conducting studies on people without their consent, giving them syphilis and trying to see what was happening over a period of years. Um, you have different things that have happened that people are going to question, like even just Henrietta Lacks, right? And what happened where they had her continuing to come back, taking her cells, making that first immortalized cell line. And she didn't understand what was happening. And her family, even to more recently, didn't even understand what was happening and thought that she was still alive in some way, right? So there's there's some amount of distrust in, I guess, science because of some past things that we should educate children about. Hey, these are mistakes that have happened in the broader community, which happens in all types of communities, not just the scientific one in the past, and be open about it. Be open about all of these things and educate, educate, educate. I'm a firm believer in being open and transparent and educating people because maybe there's a reason. Let's try and understand why people have this distrust, right? Why do you feel this way about vaccines? Okay, you said there's this study. Let's go through what that is and show how all that information is completely debunked and vaccines do not cause autism, right? Things like that. Um, Give people the opportunity to, when you're having conversations with them, or just as a, not even on a one-to-one level, but as a broader community, give them an opportunity to ask the questions so you could address it so that they feel more comfortable at not understanding science in the way that we do, and human disease and everything like that, is I think that will help. Be open, don't be judgmental, don't be so angry at people, because then they automatically put up walls and they're going to dig their heels deeper. So I think that's a big component of this as well. Um, and that's something I feel pretty strongly about, because we have to make sure people understand where we're at now and why we feel so passionately about what we do.
I think it all comes back to viability dice.
Yep.
When, it's you can have a user and you can suggest viability dice. These people have advanced degrees. They don't want to use a viability die. And I try to understand why. Why don't we want to use a viability die? May not matter to their experiment. They've never used it before. Why would they try to do something new? And in my thought, that comes back to just the information overload that we have right now. You mentioned the Tuskegee projects. I know you, Kathy. So if I wasn't familiar with that, I would go, yeah, sure. Kathy's saying it. Probably happened. I trust Kathy. Kathy looks things up. She knows things. There's so much information out there that we can't keep track of it all. So how do you possibly sort through any of this information? You have to have, your reliable experts. You have to have the people that you can trust that that information is correct. And then as soon as that, person is telling us other things that maybe we don't agree with, like that factors in, well, if one thing was wrong, oh my gosh, is all the other things I said wrong? And you kind of just have to kind of keep going with that with your experts. It's just too much mental energy, I think, to go back on that. And like think about where we've made progress, with our users. It's once they get to know us and our expertise, then you see that switch, right? I can make a suggestion, they go, great. It's not worth a year of me troubleshooting. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. I'm going to follow it. And it goes on from there. And I think I think that factors in. There's just so much information overload that you have to trap your trusted sources. And I think then it's hard that, in the scientific community, who do we have out there that is a public figure and a public face promoting these things? We've had our Bill Nyes, we've had, those, but you know, I think my background is really cool, but it's never going to be, a patented thing on a Twitch stream. We're never going to have like cytometry at these forefronts. So I think that's where we have to then be those people in our local communities, that people can rely on. Just like, you said, Kathy, people are coming to you and saying, How long does the measles vaccine work? Right? Like you are a trusted expert within your own right and within your own community. And I think we undersell our impact in that regards, especially being in cores. We're used to being ignored and people not looking to us for a lot of these things, but we have a huge impact in our local communities. And I think that's really where we can make the difference, right? It's just reaching out to people and, like you said, educating, but I think it really starts at the local level.
Forming relationships, right? And even like what you said about the viability dies or whatever, or like building that trust within the core. That starts from just being open and having that conversation and not just being like, you have to do this. That's it. Right. You just have that open relationship with them, and to be able to make that relationship, the trusting relationship. I want to also plug, you brought up Bill Nye, who I grew up and loved, and he thought I was a man many years ago. And I went to go see him in New York City, and I was all excited. And I asked a question. I had very short hair at the time. I said, "Love you, dude," but I still took it, and I loved it. Anyway, that was a very random, embarrassing story. But I will plug Dr. Andrea Love. She runs Immunologic, and she does a lot of science and health communication. And she's on Instagram. I think she has a couple of videos that Wired has hired her to do that are on YouTube. And she goes through a lot of misinformation. And she takes like people that are asking her questions on different platforms that people may have that you can communicate through. And she really addresses a lot of those questions, and she is awesome. I worked with her in the past, just in this flow cytometry community, but she has really gone above and beyond to address a lot of misinformation and to educate the public in general. And she does this for free, and of her own accord, and she's phenomenal. So I can't hype her up enough. And again, it's Immunologic, and it's Dr. Andrea Love.
We'll stick a link below, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, I'll send it through on the chat.
Nice. Yeah. There's very little that grinds my wheel nowadays more than anybody saying I'll do my own research. And this touches a bit to what Dan was saying, like you need to find your experts, but then when you say you need to do your own research, you're basically saying, I'm going to find the one that says what I want. And basically just what I really would like people to start doing is, and this is a culture change essentially, but it's basically benchmark your ideas or basically use the scientific method to think in any way you think about what's going on in your life. Like the idea that, whatever mud bat will cure your cancer, that can be tested pretty quickly. And you need to like take action when you realize that things are not moving the right way. And so, all these ideas that are floating around that are completely wacky, and people are just like, I did my own research, and like, no, you these are all good ideas maybe, but like test them out and don't be afraid to like trash them whenever. That's the whole thing in science. We take ideas, we look at them any which way, and then whenever it doesn't work, we toss them out. I think having people realize how science actually works will definitely help us in convincing people on how to move forward.
But we also need experts that look like the community.
Yeah.
And in many ways, that is lacking. When Katie was talking about Tuskegee and Henrietta Lack, I mean, there's one thing in common between those two events. It's mainly white people profiting out of people of colors, right? And that's when EDI becomes important, because we need to train scientists that reflect, that look like the community, that were brought up in those communities, that have experienced this the same life experience as others, because these people will be trustworthy. If you just bring someone with a lab coat who's like a third or fourth generation MD and is going to say like, well, trust me, this is what I know, this is what the research shows. It will likely not be received well by some people because they've been used to be pretty much fucked over by
Right.
people that that acted like that. So we need to have plans to like help first generation undergrad students continue to grad school and be able to afford grad school, which is a huge issue with the increase in cost of living. And housing crisis is also a problem pretty much everywhere, I'm sure. And we need to make an effort to also bring those voices out and within the community, because otherwise it's not going to work. You need to speak the language of the people you're talking to.
Yeah.
Just props to you for saying that, because that's awesome, Camille, and fully agree. I mean, even from a clinical standpoint, the disparities in just pain management and how people, non-Caucasians, are treated in terms of how pain is perceived and treatment of that pain, right? Just one example to add on. So it's a huge, huge point that you bring up, and I fully agree.
Is there a need to debate every single bad ideas that come up? Me said no.
We give them we give them more place and more room than they deserve, and we just
Well, it seems they get the place anyway, right? So
yeah,
so
but
now the question is, like, if you get in front of, I don't know who, like a flat earther kind of person, like people really come out thinking, oh, that flat earther guy, I like what he's saying, or
yeah, but if we distribute the video saying like, hey, look at this idiot talking about flat earth and things like that, and we just give them a bigger tribune than what they deserve, and
no, but
eventually it goes to
yeah, I get that. My issue is like leaving them the field and not fighting them ever is my problem, because like then they never get to get whacked, and the ideas just continue, and they are taking more place in our lives, and that's kind of getting to be a pain anyway.
No, it's hard. I think that's our gut reaction, is to point out injustice, even if it's in scientific facts. But yeah, and go to the research. I think it shows that doesn't win anybody over, right? It just makes us feel better about ourselves. I think that's the hardest thing. If you want to go to how do you actually make a change, right? It's you have to befriend the skeptic. You actually have to get to know them. You have to care about them. They have to be a friend in every other regard. So, and again, go back to your viability dies. It doesn't matter how much I show them that this cleans up their data. That's not how I have ever convinced anybody to use a viability die. It's only been like once we're actually friends, once I know about them and I care about them. Because until then, I'm just a core guy with whatever alternative motive, working for big viability dies. Um, but and that's with everybody, right? Why do I care? And again, why do I trust anything that Kathy says? Because I've had a number of interactions where Kathy has been able to help me out with other little problems that I have had, right? And like there's WhatsApp groups that we have for cytometry that we're helping each other out. That it gets to that point that, yeah, Kathy says something like, I'm going to trust it. But it never starts with this is the one thing that we disagree on. The problem with that is I just don't have the energy to make friends with people anymore. But I look to you all out here watching this on YouTube. Stop watching us. Go make a friend. It's too late for me.
up to a certain extent. There are people that don't deserve to be our friends and that we should not try to befriend, and that are saying things that are terrible, and you're not going to change their mind. Ignoring them is probably not the best way to go, but trying to find places where you can agree and be like, oh yeah, but we're still going to be friends, even though we disagree on this like huge elephant in the room is not going to change anything.
Right.
We can't be friends with everyone. Some people deserve to be on their own by themselves in the corner while we're having fun.
You're not wrong, but it's if there's two people up on stage debating viability dies, there's going to be somebody next to you where you go, that's right, we should burn everybody that doesn't use viability dies. Or you can say, what do you think? Like I think it's that perspective. You're not wrong, right? There are the talking heads out there that are certainly disseminating incorrect information, but where can you and I make the biggest difference? It's just turning to that person next to us and going, what do you think about viability dies? That's I think where we make the impact. And I think that that's the
Yeah.
big thing. We feel helpless like right now with everything going on. And I know that a lot of people that come to this, right, that come to watch videos and do these things, it's just, what do I do? Right? And again, that just makes me think of like my son who's just like, I don't know what to do. And it's like you play through games, you got toys, you got like 100, things. And sometimes we just need people to remind us that we do, have power. And science is not immune to these differences in the political spectrum. That, by all means, exists within our own institutions. You have people that very much vote against their own interests when it comes to science. It's like we can still have this impact at that local level.
So speaking
Yeah.
of what do you do or things like that, has any one of you been to the Stand for Science march or protest last weekend or last Friday?
Not last weekend. Having a 5-month-old baby precludes me from doing anything outside of the house. But I had historically gone years ago in DC to the March for Science and stuff like that. Um, yeah, that's an interesting one. I believe in that, all that very, very much, but I also believe in having conversations with like the with the people that disagree. I think that might get us a little bit further. And I support both very much. One thing I did want to add, and I know this isn't a scientific thing, but just in general, a comment about human interactions. There's a gentleman, Daryl Davis, right, who was a is a black man, and he was an R&B blues musician and everything like that. And he actually, just through conversations and engaging with people, got a lot of members of the KKK to leave.
Mm.
And that's something where we have this built up in their head. People are never going to change their outlook or their mindset or anything like that. And that doesn't mean that all of us have the emotional or mental capacity to have those constant interactions with people that are so against us, right? Like so against what we do and think we're, I don't know, those evil scientists in there doing terrible things, right? Um, but those of us that can, or those of us that do have the emotional bandwidth to do it, just continuing to have those conversations with people who are so against what they think that maybe you stand for, or I stand for, or Daniel or David or anyone, right, that's in this field, continue to have those conversations and also be realistic. Say not everyone in every single field is good natured and doing the right thing. Just like it's not every scientist is good. It's not every single politician is good. Well, that's a whole separate thing. Every single person in any like religious aspect or whatever, like be realistic about it. And just those of you who can, who are watching this, have the capacity to have those conversations, please continue to do so, because little by little it can make a difference.
Going back to the march, I think you're like, this is targeting different people though. So the we've been talking changing the culture, talking to people close to us, and the march we're targeting elected officials essentially, and we're telling them, yeah, look at that, we can organize this giant march, and so when the election comes back, please be on our side, otherwise we'll get in your face, and that has value as well. Like I think people should write to their elected officials participate in these activities whenever.
Yeah. Call.
Call,
Apparently
yeah.
they just toss letters
Yeah.
and emails and online petitions, doesn't matter. You call all your like any of your reps or anything like that, and that's the biggest impact. Just you start to kind of get to know people. Hey, talked to you yesterday. Here's my here's what I have to say again today, the same thing. And also when you call, just a quick little note, a lot of times what they have to do is log that one phone call under a main issue. So if you say, I'm mad about this, and I'm mad about this, and I'm mad about this, and I'm mad about this, they're going to choose one thing. So if you have the capacity, call a couple of times, or get the person who's going to say, I'm going to log this as separate issues, because that can have a big that can have a bigger impact. Just try and call as much as you can. We all have jobs. We're all trying to get through our day to day, but the phone calls seem to be a bigger impact.
Yeah.
But mass protest can have also like a huge visual impact, because you can see that on the news in the evening afterwards. And you have to keep in mind that this administration specifically really cares a lot about images and the size of crowds and things like that. So you need to also show that and show to people that they're not alone, to think this way, that you are vocally protesting and showing dissent towards the decision made by the administration against your jobs, when we're talking about indirect costs and things like that. And your ability to perform research and to bring innovation out there and bring money and income, because ultimately that's also what they care about, except when we're talking about tariffs. And to a certain extent, that's what we did 15 years ago in Canada when Stephen Harper was in power and was absolutely destroying everything with regards to climate science and climate research in Canada. If you're talking about thousands of government scientists getting laid off, it happened here under Harper's majority government. We had labs that had that were forced to close, especially like very specific ones that were lakes that were used to study the effects of climate change on bacteria, algae, over decades were closed very suddenly. Libraries in the fishing department were shut down and all their precious documents were thrown away. And people did protest and managed to make other people, make non-scientists care about that, to the point that that was definitely part of why this government was thrown away and Trudeau got elected. We managed to get people excited about the census, about statistics. That government tried to get rid of the long form census, which asked a lot of questions about how many bedrooms do you have in your house versus how many people are living in there, how many languages are spoken in your household, what type of ethnic backgrounds do you have, things like that, that are very important to plan. Everything from which school should get free breakfast to how many Indigenous people from so-and-so community still remain in the country, and not having the long-form census anymore would gave us a gap of important data for a 10-year span in Canadian history. The statistician in chief resigned over that, saying like, well, we can't do our job anymore. We can't, none of the data that we'll gather and generate will be trustworthy, and we're impacting every decision for the next 5 to 10 years or so. And it got people angry somehow, to the point that when Trudeau won his majority government afterwards and restored the long census, people were so excited to fill that goddamn form that the website broke. We broke the census website. So we need to show up. We need to voice our dissent towards decisions that impact us, because other people will be like, you know what? This is stupid. This is stupid that this scientist who just released a book is not allowed to give interviews about said book because the government is gagging them. That also happened during Harper's government.
Yeah.
Scientists were not allowed to talk to, well, government scientists were not allowed to talk to the press by themselves, and it led sometimes to 50 emails between different ministries before someone would be allowed to answer yes or no to a journalist question. People found that absolutely stupid and kept that in mind when the election came in, to be like, you know what, the economy might be good and everything, but this is just a government taking way too much power out of the people, and we can't deal with that anymore. We want some commons. I'm not going to say common sense, because that's also the tagline for the conservative parties nowadays. So I'll leave that to Pierre Poilievre. But people, if you protest and if you explain why those decisions are harmful for everyone, people will listen.
Yeah.
Was there any data on viability dies in that survey?
You just need to focus on the SSC and FSC and gate out the high SSC, low FSC. Yeah.
Let's switch gear and talk about the fraud and waste. Like it's one of the most infuriating thing when somebody tries to tell me that there's waste in science, because we're definitely the field of like the most overworked people, less paid. Like this is like sending money in science is like the best return on your buck you're ever going to get. And so the idea that like this is all a giant, I mean, it's an easy test. Like, right. It's either we're going to cut the NIH funding and nothing will change. That would mean that, yeah, all the research we were actually doing had no particular impact on our lives, or yeah, shit is going to hit the fan, and that's going to be it. So I don't know.
We've got great evidence that there is no scientific waste, because you still literally have an FC 500 behind you.
Oh yeah. They never go away, these machines. Somebody is always there to pick them up from.
Well, I wish I still had my legacy.
I mean, I think it's important to address that. Is there scientific waste? Of course. Like, is there waste in anything? Yes, right? Like, could we do better? Absolutely. Every field could be, doing better. But it's the difference between, saying you got 5 minutes to clean your room, or, you got an hour to clean your room. Like, if you say, look, bunnings can be cut, we got to get rid of incidentals, but you've got 4 years to figure it out, versus, nope, you don't get anything anymore. And we can all think back to our parents and the difference between them saying, like, I've warned you, go pick up, you've got 1 hour to pick up your room, versus them saying, like, you didn't pick it up, and then just coming in there and whooping us. There's a difference. And we all know that one of those is more productive towards accomplishing the final goal. And one of those is more about, I would assume, the joy of yelling. And that's the thing. So is there scientific waste? Yes. Are we aware of that as core managers and directors? Absolutely. The number of people that want to buy their own instrument and only use it, like, come on, we all know the FSCs. I know that you only have used your instrument for 3 hours in the last year, and that costs $100,000 versus, just using shared equipment. So I think that's the other thing too, is we all can't just take polar sides on things. Like, yes, is there ways? Yes, but like there is ways that we can improve, that we can address things, that we can work together on that. Because that's at least one of the arguments I hear. They go, well, there's tons of waste, and you're saying there's no waste. No, there's waste, but there are appropriate ways to deal with these things.
Yeah, and I think it's also the fact that I agree with you, Daniel. I think it's also the fact that you could be very realistic about the scenario. Yeah, there are scenarios like that. That's like, and especially in core facilities, we try fighting against things like that are happening. But it's also, making people aware too of the expenses that go into scientific research, right? How much does it cost to get all these mice? How much does it cost for reagents? How much does it cost for all of these things? Um, as a whole, it's incredibly expensive for a lot of these researchers to do the work that they do. Flow cytometry compared to like molecular, I believe, is incredibly cheap, right? So, there's varying technologies, there's varying costs, but as a whole, what a lot of researchers are trying to do is not cheap, right? So just telling people, if you want advancements and if you want, specifically in the United States, you want us to be an innovator and a leader in the field, looping back to what we were talking about before, it costs money, but that money has a return to it. So we can address the fact that there is some waste, of course, but it's not to the level that they're claiming, right? Of course, that's what you're seeing in a lot of the news across the board with Social Security, with things like that, with a lot of different claims that are being made that are largely being debunked even by the leaders of those individual departments. But let's talk about the reality of the situation. It is expensive, but you get a return on that. And there might be waste, but it's not to the level that you think there is. And making these drastic changes in a very short period of time is just going to set us back years and years. And it's not the right response.
But I think the argument when that gets put out there that there's waste, it's not. I think how is that message being perceived by most people? And it's, I need something in my community. I need something personally to improve the quality of my life. And that money is going towards research. It's going towards these transgendered mice instead of turning my water back on, instead of making the air cleaner, instead of opening up the local VA. I think that's where we can get stuck as scientists too. And the message is not the message, right? It's how is that being perceived elsewhere? And if it's, oh, somebody else has got new instruments because I want that money from my facility instead to help more people. I think that that's where people are coming from too, right? That I think that's important to say, like, we're not taking the money from anybody else with these studies to try to solve these things from cancer. This is this is a drop in the bucket in terms of, the total federal costs. I think it's hard to wrap our mind around all of that. But great, we've eliminated all this money. Questions that everybody should be asking is, where's that money going? And that's the conversation that I've heard is, great, you've eliminated all the scientific waste money. What are we going to do with this money, right? Who's this going to help now? That's fine. Eliminate my position, eliminate flow cytometry at Michigan State University. But where is that going? How is that going to go help more people? That's what I want to hear.
There's another,
Because I haven't heard that yet.
I kind of want to land this discussion on the CyTOF specifically because I'm a flow core guy and this is a flow cytometry podcast, and I'm kind of bitter about that technology. But the way I think about it, like so the last State of the Union address, the president just listed a bunch of, like, basically reading a bunch of projects that sounded completely insane on paper, without going into any details, and just like he went for the jokes essentially. And I bet you can do the same thing with any given paper. You just read the titles, and it's either to completely understand, like nothing will make sense out of the lining up all these words together will get you nowhere because you don't understand what this is about, or it's just like complete something that sounds nonsensical, or the fact of the matter is, when you do research and it doesn't produce the right results, so it doesn't lead you up, like you pay a price, right? And to bring it back to mass cytometry is this technology that was the big thing in, I don't know, 2013 and up. We at our facility bought one in 2015. It got installed in 2017, and it basically never got used, essentially. Like a couple of projects here and there, but like overall, it's a giant hole of money we just like threw in there. And I'm incredibly angry about it, that it turned out that way. But it should be known that every single, so it's just an NIH grant that we wrote. It was the best grant we ever read, like I've ever read. All the big names in our institutions were behind it. Every single following S10 grant we wrote got tanked because of that one. Like, because whenever you have to report on your usage on the instrument you get from these NIH grants, and if you cannot show how well used they were, you pay a deep price. And that is not something that people necessarily know about, how money is handled in science. It's not like you get the money until you drop dead. It's like, yeah, do something with that money or else you're out, right? It's a cutthroat industry, and it's like, I don't know. That was my thing about the CyTOF. The way I wanted to continue this discussion is like, okay, what do we do as core facility people to make? All right, here's the thing. I never said this story, but like when I was my former job in Ontario, they hired me to help support the lady that was on the MoFlow, because both people in MoFlow left, and they took cell culture person, put her in front of that instrument. She went like, whoa, a minute, I need support. And so by the time they found me in Montreal, I moved, and she was fine. And so I had nothing to do over there. I was just like hanging out. And at some point, there was the season of performance reviews, and I saw colleagues just like getting hacked left and right, just like, and I knew it was not a good position for me. So I went there and I read the review that my boss wrote, and it was like bad but wrong, right? It's like whatever she wrote about me was like, he doesn't want to do the jobs. Like, it's nothing she wrote as like it was a bad thing, just meant to throw me out. But like, it was incorrect. Like, these are not the reason I was not good at my job. The reason I was not good at my job was because, I would show up at 10, and at 11 I was trying to get people to go to lunch and come back at 1, and at 2 I was out, and I was just not there. Like, so I wrote back 2 pages. I was a Cyrano, the Bergerac thing. At some point, he gets insulted and he just like spends the next 5 minutes and throwing insults at himself. I did that 2 pages long, a rebuttal to my bad performance review. That's even worse, basically saying, so that's kind of, I had a point here. I'm pretty sure I forgot what it is, but the general idea is like, what could we have done as a group to basically stop the CyTOF thing from happening? Is there like better communication? Like, did people knew about how hard it was to operate this instrument? Is there any other technologies like that? I'm thinking like, Dan is a big proponent of imaging. Well, should we all go into imaging now? Or is that just another one of these gimmick that ultimately we'll do a couple of things and then we'll just go back to traditional flow and spectral and stuff? Like, so that this is kind of where I kind of feel we should have a better voice and better communication between different cores. Am I nuts?
I, no, I don't think it, I mean, so David, I'll say that I was tasked with finding out everything I could about mass cytometry and the CyTOF back around that time, around 2013 or so. And I was told, hey, this could be really good for your career, right? I was newer into flow at the time. And so like this could be your ticket. You could be a mass cytometrist and all this stuff. So I looked into it, right? And I did all these presentations. And what we did is we did a side by side of flow and mass and kind of did a side by side study. I was very lucky at the time that I was able to work with Adib Rahman at Mount Sinai, and he had a CyTOF there, and we did a side by side with flow. And the cytometer, the mass cytometer, the CyTOF, and we were able to do that side by side. And we were curious, and we thought that, we had understood all the caveats of that instrument, right? But we also understood that the recovery rate at that time, not great. The amount of work that goes into it, like, all of the design and everything like that, the amount of work that goes into maintenance of the instrument, it needs a very dedicated operator. So it was, not fully something we could buy into, with the exception that when the imaging component was added onto it, that was actually pretty cool, I thought. It had a really promising future at the time. But I think as much as we can collaborate, right, we learn from each other. Let's understand the full caveats of if we bring this instrument on board, what it's going to take from a monetary perspective, and people are going to buy in, understanding the reality of what it's going to look like. You're going to lose 50% of your sample. You're going to not be able to get anything back from it. We don't have this imaging component that's going to take I'm throwing out a very arbitrary number, a day to run a certain section, right? Like, is this all worth it? And be realistic about it. If you're able to partner with someone who actually has that instrumentation, I think that's where us working together as cytometrists, whether it's flow or mass or imaging, whatever it is, help each other out. That's why shout out to Daniel's Discord cytometry channel, right? It's awesome. I feel like I'm a 90-year-old lady because I was like, I have this WhatsApp and then I have Purdue and I just tired. But then I also Derek Davies told me years ago I needed to get a life because I was sitting in bed responding to people on Reddit about their flow cytometry experiments. He's like, you need to
That's what we strive for. I don't know what's wrong with that.
Well, that was at a point before marriage and before baby, right? So I had the mental capacity to do all that, but that's how we communicate. That's how we help each other out. We talk to each other. And I think if there were a Discord at that time, or there was a heavier presence on Reddit or whatever it is, probably would have been a little bit more information out there to help each other out with. So we prevent things like that from happening. But for me, that was an IRL, a Adib Rahman helping me out and saying, sure, come run some samples here. Let's go over everything. And we understood the caveats and wound up not going forward with it because we understood some of the implications. But that's my quarter. That's definitely more than 2 cents.
I think there's pros and cons to everything. There's going to be niche applications, but it's always going to be worth it for science as a whole because of the things that we learned. Did things come out of mass cytometry? Yeah, that advanced the whole field, right, of mass spec. There were things that we learned. There were things that we learned that I know went into the decision for how do we make spectral better. Because if that didn't exist, we didn't need to come up with a lot of these new techniques. We didn't need to come up with better deconvolution methods. So even if the effects aren't apparent, they're there. And it's that same argument with why would I research this rare disease that isn't going to be profitable? Because the things we learned along the way, right, could be translatable to other things. But that doesn't address, I think, your question of, but how do we stop our institutions from buying things that we know they don't need? And that's I think up to us in core facilities to try to do a better job of advocating for the effect that we have. It drives me nuts that when you go to fill out, I would like to be a reviewer for a paper. What is your area of expertise? Is it microbiology? Is it this? Is it that? when the whole point of the papers is it's the instruments that they use. And you don't have a section to say, I am an expert in flow cytometry. I am an expert in confocal microscopy. I am an expert in mass spec. I have the true skill sets to evaluate if the study was done correctly. Because often it's not, is the question valid? Oftentimes it doesn't matter. Was it done correctly? Is often the important question, right? If you want to take it back to taking your instrument to the car mechanic, like if he said he fixed my brakes, did he fix my brakes correctly? We can argue over the semantics of, you know, is that what the actual problem was? But oftentimes, like, did they fix the problem that they said that they fixed? And for that, I think you got to turn to people that are experts in the instrumentation. And we want to look at, again, right? Our flow cytometry, our immunology. Where do I ask a question? Do I ask the immunologist? Do I ask the people that are using the instruments? And the reason I think that this has really grown, and it's not just me, and talking to like the other mods of like microscopy, again, of mass spec, of genomics, the problems themselves, like at the scientific level, become really, really complicated. But the reasons that a lot of experiments don't work is just to failure to understand the instrumentation itself. And I think that comes to us to advocate that this is what we need. We need reviewers that can comment and say, were the flow cytometry experiments in this done correctly? And when we're able to do that, and again, if we can get into those grant reviews, which again we could if we had the time, but I think that's how we change a lot of these things, um, is advocating on that level. Does that make sense?
No, but
I'm
I think
halfway through
also
the whiskey now, so it's okay if it doesn't.
I think also a lot of problem with the CyTOF is that it's a fine machine. It's just that the expectations or what researchers were told that they could do with, especially those that decided to buy one, did not match. They didn't realize before purchasing the instrument how much optimization would be required, how much work and construction would also be required from facilities to get it to work. Yeah, you look at a Bowden-Miller lab paper and it seems effortless. But if you're not in the Bowden-Miller lab and if you're not in Switzerland, how do you make it to work yourself? And part of the issue when you put it under a flow core facility, depending on how many people are working at that core, like, will you be able to get someone to spend enough time in front of the instrument and to get the proper training to help users and help researchers do something with that machine? It's why when our previous, the core facility manager that was managing the CyTOF at my university left, people thought of putting it under the flow core. And we said no, because we don't have the expertise for it. We don't have the proper knowledge to make it work. They expect us to work to be 100% self-sustainable and manage to pay our salaries, service contracts, everything out of user fees. And I personally saw that as a money drain. We will never be able to pay for service contract and our salaries out of user fees. And that machine needs a service contract very, very much. So they ultimately decided to hire a new core manager just for that. And I think it would, and to also buy the imaging add-on, which was probably also probably the best option, or the
Yes, adding imaging is always the best option.
Yes, Danielle, sure. Absolutely. But the machine is still working. There are some labs that are using it. No one uses it for single cell analysis. Everyone uses it for imaging. And eventually it's probably going to be thrown away, as well as that core facility is focusing or moving more towards spatial biology and has managed to buy instrumentation that targets that field a little bit more and are also far less expensive and more recent. But it filled a niche that was not existed, that needed an instrument for a decade, maybe. But yeah, people had probably the wrong expectations about it, especially when they bought it, that it would be just like a flow cytometer. You have a few hours of training and then like you pop your tubes. Maybe it's going to take 6 hours to get your results out of your 3 samples, but it should work and you will get a ton of results and you won't have to do any other experiments throughout your PhD afterwards. You'll spend it analyzing that data, but that's not the reality at all.
I mean, the fun of a dumpster fire is trying to figure out how you can best use the heat.
Yeah.
And I love this. I never knew that about you guys with the S10 or getting punished for that. That's something that never even occurred to me. That I would love if there was a way that you could type that up, that I could take that to my admins, who again are always like, well, you can apply for institutional funding if you don't get the grants, to be able to say, look, I can get the grant and it's going to hurt us for the next 10 years because unless you can guarantee you're not going to let other faculty buy the same instrument, where I'm not going to be able to get the publications that I need to get more S10 grants to show the utility. If I don't have institutional support, right, to help people use this instrumentation when we get it, it is going to hurt us in the long run. I need that, right? I would love to be able to take that. And I think, please, can you write that up? We can get a, down with S10s like white paper.
All right.
That might be a no.
That might be a no.
That's what I heard.
Cheryl, I'm not doing that.
But like you said, we come together in a community, we share these struggles, that helps. I'm willing to learn from your mistakes, David.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I do believe too that the mass cytometry push really helped put the fire, light the fire for spectral, and really push the companies to develop that, because that was huge. And I also did drool over the Bodenmiller data when they present. I was like, oh, it's so pretty. So I'm debating this idea in my head, because you had the traditional flow was just like getting more complex, shoving more lasers, detectors, but you could get $1 million instrument that would do 50 markers. And then spectral came along at the same time. And for about, I don't know, 5-10 years, they kind of competed. And then spectral showed up and basically killed both of the other technologies right away. So I'm the reason I'm bitter is I kind of know somebody knew that was coming, and so could have just said, hey, just wait up just a couple of years. I mean, you also probably have similar pains in molecular labs, right? Where different sequencers, right? You'd finally get the latest and greatest, and then all of a sudden, I'm not a molecular person, but what was it? qPCR, that was the gold standard. Now it's ddPCR. I just heard about that, right? So, because I'm very much not a molecular person, but think about all the funding and everything that gets put in place for one, and then all of a sudden you're at the next best thing, right? So I don't think it's something that's unique to us. I think it's across a lot of different core technologies, and it's what drives us forward as a community, as unfortunate as it is. It's we push that innovation forward.
Okay. I wanted to tie this all up in a nice bow, as nicely as I can, by talking about the brainchild of mine that I have a lot of ideas that I throw out and nothing comes out of it. And this one, I think might actually go somewhere. But a friend of mine made a cool logo for something called the Royal Academy of International Flow Cytometry Affairs. And this is now going to be the name of this YouTube channel we're on. The ChUG podcast will be under this Rivka let's call it, thing. And the general idea is to basically get to do more things and get more people to do podcasting. I've talking to a few people. I know nobody really wants to become a podcaster in that I've talked to, but maybe you have a couple of episodes in your a couple of ideas that I want to talk about this thing, and it's pretty straightforward to do. It's pretty easy. You get a bunch of people on cam and you talk, and then we can put. So the general idea would be, Rivka would basically take care of editing. You do whatever you want. You make something that you find interesting that has to do with flow cytometry, obviously, but put that on tape, send it our way, and we'll publish. And if you're interested in doing something like that, let me know, and we'll get started. And that basically includes general idea on how to fight science, how to fight bad science, how to fight how to change the culture currently that we live into something that's more science friendly. How do we better share information about the newer technologies, the pitfalls and the benefits, and it's something that we should invest right now, or should we wait until something else come along? And all these things can be discussed and will be helpful. I heard the Discord channel is great. It's been called by some verbal
diarrhea.
So there's that. So having a podcast might be a bit
cha. Sorry, that was a very bad joke that I added in there. And I'm only drinking water, so.
Well, I'll commit to this. I've had an idea for a while that I want to do with a podcast called Sorted Tales, is there are always silver linings, and in a time where things are tough, I think it's really important to celebrate all the unsung heroes in cytometry. And so anybody out there who thinks that if you got something cool to share, I would love to share that with the rest of the flow cytometry community. If you're running samples out on the high seas in space, or just you think you've done something cool in your lab that you'd like the chance to share with everybody else, I'd love to talk to you. And I think that again, we can share all these unique experiences, whether it's, an S10 that, was a black mark against you for the last 10 years or something. It's only beneficial to share our stories with everybody out there for the benefit of the community.
It's a new podcast that we just made that's called Tools of the Trade. We recorded the first episode. We talked to the people at America First, which is a First American, which is a banking group providing loans for purchasing instruments for core facilities. It's kind of new and alternative way of getting instruments in your lab. And we have another idea of getting the same podcast now, where we have people compete for data analysis using FlowJo against FCS Express. Let's see how that goes.
How can we bring flow cytometry to Twitch? That's the question.
That's where the big bucks are.
I want to do the voiceover and the whole description and analyzing the moves. I'm totally in.
Yeah, it's gonna be exciting. All right. Any last words? There's this big news that came up. BD splitting into BD Plus and presumably BD Old, BD New and BD Old. Screwed up my joke right there. Any thoughts about this stuff? I have no particular idea of why things like that gets decided, but we hope for the best for everybody involved. This is what we can say.
A lot of talented people. I'm sure everything will be good.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for coming. It's been great.
Thanks.
Thanks for listeners. Do the things with the click and blah blah. We need to get to 5 million subscribers.
So we can retire.
Yeah. All right. Cheers.
All right.